Sarah Jenkins had always been different from other 12-year-old girls in Millbrook. While her classmates spent afternoons at the mall or glued to their phones, Sarah preferred exploring the wooded trails behind her grandmother's house with her faithful companion, Rex. The golden retriever had been her best friend since she was 7, and together they had discovered hidden caves, secret clearings, and countless adventures that most adults would dismiss as childhood imagination. On this particular Tuesday afternoon in late September, the autumn air carried a crisp bite that made Sarah zip up her worn denim jacket. School had ended early due to a teacher training day, giving her unexpected free time. Her grandmother, who had been watching her since her parents divorced 2 years ago, was busy with her weekly quilting circle, so Sarah grabbed Rex's leash and headed for their favorite trail. The path wound through dense maple and oak trees, their leaves painted in brilliant shades of orange and red. Rex bounded ahead, his tail wagging enthusiastically as he chased falling leaves and investigated interesting scents. Sarah loved these moments of peace, away from the whispers at school about her family situation and the constant worry she saw in her grandmother's eyes whenever money came up in conversation. As they walked deeper into the woods, Sarah noticed Rex's behavior change. His playful bounding slowed to a cautious trot, and his ears perked up in the way they did when he sensed something unusual. Sarah had learned to trust Rex's instincts over the years. The dog had once led her away from a wasp nest and another time had refused to cross a creek that later flooded dangerously. The trail curved sharply to the left, following an old creek bed that had been dry for most of the summer. Sarah could hear the distant hum of traffic from the main road, but here in the woods it felt like another world entirely. Rex suddenly stopped and began sniffing the air intensely, his nose working overtime to process whatever scent had caught his attention. Sarah called softly to him, but Rex was already moving off the trail, pushing through a thicket of brambles that Sarah usually avoided because of the thorns. Today, something compelled her to follow. She carefully picked her way through the undergrowth, protecting her face from the reaching branches and trying to keep up with Rex's determined pace. The trees began to thin, and Sarah realized they were approaching a small clearing she had never seen before. Rex's tail had stopped wagging entirely now, and he moved with the cautious grace of a hunter. Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach but pushed forward, trusting in Rex's judgment and her own curiosity. As they emerged from the tree line, Sarah's eyes immediately fixed on something that seemed completely out of place in the peaceful woods. Parked at an odd angle in the clearing was a silver pickup truck with tinted windows. The vehicle looked expensive and new, certainly not the type of truck she would expect to find abandoned in the middle of nowhere. Rex growled low in his throat, a sound Sarah had rarely heard from her usually gentle companion. The dog's hackles were raised and he positioned himself slightly in front of Sarah in a protective stance. She knelt down and placed a calming hand on Rex's head, trying to understand what had upset him so much. The truck appeared empty from where they stood, but something about the scene felt wrong. The doors were closed, but one of the back windows was slightly cracked open. There were no signs of camping gear or hiking equipment that might explain why someone had driven so far off the beaten path. The more Sarah studied the vehicle, the more questions arose in her mind. She noticed that the truck's license plate was partially obscured by mud, as if someone had deliberately covered it. Fresh tire tracks in the soft earth showed that the vehicle had been driven here recently, probably within the last day or two. But there were no footprints leading away from the truck, which struck Sarah as particularly odd. Rex began to pace nervously, alternating between staring at the truck and looking back at Sarah with an expression that seemed to say, they should leave immediately. But Sarah found herself frozen by curiosity and a growing sense that something was seriously wrong with this situation. She had read enough mystery novels to know that abandoned vehicles in remote locations rarely meant anything good. The afternoon sun filtered through the canopy above, casting shifting shadows across the clearing that made the truck seem almost sinister. Sarah checked her phone and realized she had no signal this deep in the woods. The digital clock showed 3:47 p.m., which meant her grandmother would not expect her home for at least another hour. As she stood there trying to decide what to do, Sarah heard something that made her blood run cold. It was faint, almost impossible to distinguish from the normal sounds of the forest, but Rex's reaction confirmed that she had not imagined it. Coming from inside the truck was a muffled sound that could only be described as someone trying to call for help. Rex barked once, sharp and urgent, then looked at Sarah with an intensity she had never seen before. The dog's message was clear. There were people inside that truck and they were in trouble. Sarah's heart began to race as she realized that her afternoon adventure had suddenly become something much more serious and potentially dangerous. The responsible thing would be to turn around, get back to civilization and call the police. But the sounds from the truck suggested that whoever was inside might not have time to wait for help to arrive. Sarah looked down at Rex, who gazed back at her with complete trust and confidence in whatever decision she would make. Taking a deep breath, Sarah made a choice that would change everything. Instead of running away, she began to move carefully toward the silver truck, with Rex staying close by her side. As they got closer, the muffled sounds became clearer, and Sarah realized with growing alarm that there were definitely people trapped inside, and they were desperately trying to get out. Sarah's hands trembled as she approached the silver truck, each step feeling like it took tremendous courage. Rex stayed close to her side, his protective instincts fully activated. The muffled sounds from inside the vehicle were becoming more distinct, and Sarah could now make out what sounded like two different voices, both male, both clearly in distress. When she reached the passenger side of the truck, Sarah peered through the tinted window but could barely make out shapes in the dim interior. She tried the door handle, but it was locked. Moving around to the driver's side, she found the same situation. The voices inside seemed to notice her presence because the sounds became more urgent and desperate. Sarah pressed her ear against the cool metal of the truck and listened carefully. She could hear what sounded like people trying to speak through tape or cloth covering their mouths. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Someone had tied up these people and left them in this truck in the middle of nowhere. Rex began sniffing around the truck systematically, his nose working to gather information. The dog paused at the back of the vehicle and looked up at Sarah meaningfully. She followed his lead and discovered that the tailgate was not completely closed. There was just enough gap for her small fingers to grip the edge. With considerable effort, Sarah managed to pull the tailgate down. The sight that greeted her made her gasp and step backward in shock. Two men in what appeared to be police uniforms were lying in the truck bed, their hands and feet bound with thick rope and silver duct tape covering their mouths. Their eyes were wide with a mixture of relief and urgency when they saw her. The officers appeared to be middle-aged, both with the sturdy build typical of law enforcement. One had graying hair and kind eyes that reminded Sarah of her grandfather, while the other was younger with dark hair and a desperate expression. Both wore the tan and brown uniforms of the county sheriff's department, complete with badge numbers that Sarah could clearly see. Sarah quickly looked around the clearing to make sure they were alone before approaching the trapped officers. Her mind raced as she tried to process what she was seeing. How had two police officers ended up tied up in the back of a truck in the woods? Who had done this to them, and where were those people now? The older officer made urgent mumbling sounds through his tape, his eyes darting between Sarah and the surrounding woods. Sarah understood immediately. He was trying to warn her that the people who had done this might still be nearby. The thought sent a chill down her spine, but she knew she could not leave these men here to suffer or worse. Rex positioned himself at the edge of the clearing, acting as a lookout while Sarah climbed into the truck bed. The officer's eyes followed her every movement, hope and desperation evident in their expressions. Sarah had to overcome her fear and revulsion at seeing people treated this way, but she forced herself to focus on helping them. She started with the older officer, carefully peeling back the duct tape from his mouth. He gasped as soon as his mouth was free, taking in deep breaths of fresh air. His voice was hoarse when he spoke, barely above a whisper. "Thank God you found us," he said, his relief evident. "I'm Officer Martinez, and this is Officer Reynolds. We've been here since yesterday morning. You need to be very careful. The men who did this might come back." Sarah's fingers fumbled with the ropes binding his hands. The knots were tight and professional, clearly tied by someone who knew what they were doing. As she worked, Officer Martinez continued speaking in urgent, quiet tones. "They took our radios, our weapons, everything. They said they would be back to move us tonight. You're just a kid. You should not be here alone. Is there anyone with you?" Sarah glanced at Rex, who was still maintaining his vigilant watch. "Just my dog," she whispered back. "But he's really smart and protective." "What happened to you? How did you end up here?" Officer Martinez winced as circulation returned to his hands when Sarah finally loosened the ropes. He immediately began working on his leg restraints while Sarah moved to help Officer Reynolds with his tape. "We were responding to a call about suspicious activity at the old Miller farm. Martinez explained. When we arrived, it turned out to be a setup. 3 men with masks ambushed us. They were professionals, ex-military or something similar. They knew exactly how to disable our vehicle and neutralize us without causing permanent harm. Officer Reynolds coughed and cleared his throat once his mouth was free. They kept talking about needing time to finish some kind of job, he added. Something about a big score tonight. They planned to move us to somewhere more permanent after dark. Sarah felt ice form in her stomach at the implications of somewhere more permanent. These officers were in real danger, and she was their only hope of rescue. But she was just a 12-year-old girl with a dog, facing professional criminals who had already proven they could overpower trained police officers. As she worked on Officer Reynolds' restraints, Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. They were too far from help to simply run for assistance, and the officers had warned that the criminals might return at any time. Her cell phone had no signal here, so calling for help was not an option. Rex suddenly perked up his ears and looked toward the tree line where they had entered the clearing. Sarah froze, and both officers immediately tensed. Had someone returned? Were they about to be discovered? Rex's body language suggested he had heard something, but after a few tense moments he relaxed slightly. Probably just a deer, Officer Martinez whispered, but his eyes remained alert and worried. You've done incredibly well, but we need to get out of here. Do you know these woods well enough to guide us back to the main road? Sarah nodded, though her confidence was not as strong as she tried to appear. She knew the general direction back to town, but leading 2 injured adults through dense forest while potentially being pursued by dangerous criminals was far beyond anything she had ever imagined herself doing. Officer Reynolds was finally able to sit up as his restraints came loose. Both men were clearly dehydrated and weak from their ordeal, but determination showed in their faces. They had jobs to do and criminals to catch, even though they had been the victims just moments before. The most important thing, Officer Martinez said as he tested his ability to stand, is getting word to our department about what happened. Those men mentioned something about a major crime happening tonight, and we're the only ones who know about it. Sarah realized that this was no longer just about rescuing 2 officers. Whatever crime these masked men were planning, it was apparently serious enough that they were willing to kidnap police officers to prevent interference. The weight of responsibility settled on her young shoulders as she understood that the safety of others might depend on their escape. The escape from the clearing proved more challenging than Sarah had anticipated. Both officers were weak from their ordeal, moving slowly and requiring frequent rest stops. Officer Martinez had injured his ankle during the initial struggle with their captors, while Officer Reynolds suffered from severe dehydration that made him dizzy and unsteady on his feet. Rex took the lead, his keen senses alert for any signs of danger as they made their way through the dense undergrowth. Sarah stayed close to the officers, helping them navigate around fallen logs and through particularly thick patches of brambles. Every snapping twig or rustling leaf made them freeze and listen, afraid that their captors had returned. As they struggled through the forest, Officer Martinez shared more details about their attackers. The men had been highly organized and professional, wearing tactical gear and using military-style hand signals to communicate. They had disabled the police cruiser's radio and GPS tracking system before moving the officers to the remote location. They knew our patrol schedule, Martinez explained during one of their rest stops, his voice tight with concern. Someone on the inside must have given them information about our routes and timing. This was not a random encounter. The implications of this revelation chilled Sarah. If the criminals had inside help, then nowhere in town might be truly safe. They could not simply run to the nearest police station and assume they would be protected. The corruption could extend to people in positions of trust and authority. Officer Reynolds, despite his weakened condition, remained focused on the larger threat. They mentioned something about the bank, he told Sarah as she helped him over a fallen tree. And they kept checking their watches, talking about a timeline. Whatever they are planning, it is happening tonight, and it is big. Sarah's knowledge of the woods served them well as they made steady progress toward civilization. She guided them along game trails and through clearings that offered easier passage than the dense forest. Rex proved invaluable, alerting them to obstacles and potentially dangerous terrain before they encountered problems. After what felt like hours but was probably only 45 minutes, they reached a point where Sarah could see the edge of the woods through the trees. Beyond lay a residential area on the outskirts of Millbrook, with houses and streets that represented safety and communication with the outside world. But as they prepared to leave the cover of the forest, Rex suddenly growled and crouched low to the ground. Sarah immediately dropped down, pulling Officer Reynolds with her, while Martinez struggled to lower himself behind a large oak tree. Through the trees, they could see a silver SUV slowly cruising the residential street, its occupants clearly searching for something. "That's them," Martinez whispered, his voice barely audible. "Same vehicle they used at the farm. They are looking for us." The SUV made several passes along the street, its occupants scanning the area methodically. Sarah realized with growing dread that the criminals were not only searching for the escaped officers but had somehow anticipated the most likely route they would take to reach help. "They know these woods too," Reynolds observed quietly. "This whole operation has been planned down to the smallest detail. They probably have escape routes mapped and contingency plans for exactly this situation." Sarah's mind raced as she considered their options. They could not emerge from the woods while the criminals were actively patrolling the area, but they also could not remain hidden indefinitely. The officers needed medical attention and food, and time was running out before whatever crime was planned for that evening. Rex, sensing Sarah's distress, moved closer to her and nuzzled her hand gently. The simple gesture of comfort from her loyal companion gave Sarah the clarity she needed to think beyond her fear. She knew these neighborhoods better than any criminal could, having grown up here and explored every street and alley during her childhood adventures. "There's another way," she whispered to the officers. "My friend Jenny lives 3 blocks from here, and her dad is a volunteer firefighter. He has radio equipment in his garage. We could contact the state police or sheriff's department directly." Officer Martinez looked skeptical. "That's assuming we can get there without being spotted, and that Jenny's father is home and willing to help strangers." Sarah smiled for the first time since discovering the officers. "Jenny's dad knows me. I've been to their house dozens of times, and he's always home on Tuesday afternoons because he works night shifts at the factory. Plus there's a way to get there, through the backyards and drainage ditches, that most adults don't know about." The plan required them to wait until the SUV completed another patrol circuit and moved to a different street. During that window, they would need to cross the open ground quickly and disappear into the network of backyard paths that Sarah had used countless times during games of hide-and-seek with neighborhood children. As they waited for their opportunity, Officer Reynolds shared more details about the conversation he had overheard between their captors. The men had discussed timing extensively, mentioning that their primary target would be vulnerable at exactly 8:30 p.m. when the security shift changed. They had also mentioned needing to clear the area before 10 p.m. when additional patrols would begin. "The First National Bank," Martinez concluded grimly. "It's the only target in town that would require this level of planning and coordination. They're going to rob the bank tonight, and they needed us out of the way to ensure clean escape routes." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her even more heavily. The bank robbery would not only represent a major crime, but could potentially endanger innocent people, including bank employees and anyone else who happened to be in the area during the heist. When the SUV finally moved out of sight, Sarah led the officers in a crouched run across the open ground to the first backyard. Rex bounded alongside them, his excitement at finally moving toward safety evident in his energetic pace. They navigated through a series of yards, staying low behind fences and garden sheds, using the network of paths that only children seemed to know existed. The journey took 20 minutes of careful movement, but they successfully reached Jenny's backyard without being detected. Sarah could see lights on in the house and Jenny's father's truck in the driveway, which meant he was home as expected. As they approached the back door, Sarah realized that this moment would change everything. Once they contacted authorities, the situation would expand beyond her control. Professional law enforcement would take over, and she would return to being just a 12-year-old girl who had stumbled into something far bigger than herself. But looking at the 2 officers who trusted her completely, and thinking about the innocent people who might be harmed if the bank robbery proceeded as planned, Sarah knew she had made the right choice. Rex wagged his tail as if sensing her resolve, and together they approached the house that represented their first real chance at getting help. Jenny's father, Tom Morrison nearly dropped his coffee mug when he opened his back door to find Sarah standing there with two bedraggled police officers and a panting golden retriever. Sarah had known Tom for years through his daughter, but she had never seen the expression of shock and concern that crossed his weathered face as he took in the scene before him. "Sarah? What in the world?" Tom began, then stopped as he noticed the condition of the officers. Both men looked exhausted and disheveled, with rope burns visible on their wrists and dirt staining their uniforms. "Come inside, all of you. Now." Tom Morrison was exactly the kind of person Sarah had hoped he would be in a crisis. The 45-year-old factory worker and volunteer firefighter had a calm demeanor and practical approach to problems that came from years of dealing with emergencies. He ushered them into his kitchen without asking questions, immediately offering water and food while his trained eye assessed the officer's conditions. "Sir, we need to contact the state police immediately," Officer Martinez said as soon as he had taken several long drinks of water. "There's been a kidnapping and we have reason to believe a major crime is planned for tonight." Tom nodded seriously and led them to his garage, where his emergency radio equipment was set up on a workbench. As a volunteer firefighter, he maintained communication gear that could reach multiple agencies and emergency services throughout the region. Within minutes, he had established contact with the state police dispatch center. The conversation that followed was intense and urgent. Officer Martinez provided his badge number and detailed account of their kidnapping, while Officer Reynolds added information about the planned bank robbery. Sarah listened with growing amazement. As the scope of the criminal operation became clear, through their professional reporting, the state police dispatcher confirmed that both officers had been reported missing when they failed to respond to radio calls the previous day. A search had been initiated, but without knowing their location or the circumstances of their disappearance, authorities had made little progress. Sarah's discovery had potentially saved their lives and prevented a major crime. Within 30 minutes, Tom's backyard was filled with unmarked police vehicles and plainclothes officers. Sarah found herself at the center of a major law enforcement operation, her quiet Tuesday afternoon having transformed into something that belonged in a television drama rather than real life. Detective Captain Linda Harrison, a stern woman in her 50s who clearly commanded respect from her subordinates, interviewed Sarah extensively about her discovery of the officers. Sarah recounted every detail she could remember, from Rex's initial alertness to the conversation she had overheard between the rescued officers. "You may have prevented not just a bank robbery, but potential loss of life," Detective Harrison told Sarah seriously. "These criminals were willing to kidnap police officers, which suggests they would not hesitate to harm civilians who got in their way." The investigation that unfolded revealed the sophistication of the criminal operation. The three men who had kidnapped the officers were part of a larger network that had been planning the bank robbery for months. They had studied patrol patterns, identified vulnerabilities in the security system, and even infiltrated certain aspects of local law enforcement to gather intelligence. Officer Martinez's suspicion about inside help proved correct when investigators discovered that a dispatcher in the sheriff's department had been providing information to the criminals in exchange for money. The dispatcher had not only shared patrol schedules, but had also delayed reporting the officer's disappearance to buy the criminals additional time. As the afternoon progressed, Sarah watched in fascination as a complex law enforcement operation took shape around her. Undercover officers were positioned throughout downtown Millbrook. Surveillance teams monitored the bank and surrounding area, and tactical units prepared to respond to the robbery attempt that intelligence suggested would occur, exactly as the rescued officers had reported. Rex, meanwhile, had become something of a celebrity among the police officers. Several of them took turns petting him and offering treats, clearly impressed by his role in the discovery and rescue. One of the K-9 unit officers even suggested that Rex had demonstrated the kind of instincts and intelligence that would make him an excellent police dog. Jenny Morrison arrived home from school to find her backyard transformed into a command center and her friend Sarah being treated as a hero by serious-looking adults in business suits. The two girls had been friends since kindergarten, but Jenny had never seen Sarah in a situation quite like this one. "I can't believe you rescued actual police officers," Jenny whispered to Sarah during a brief break in the interviews. "This is like something from a movie." You're going to be famous." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the attention and praise, but also deeply satisfied that her decision to investigate the abandoned truck had led to such positive results. The officers who had thanked her repeatedly for saving their lives, and the knowledge that she had helped prevent a crime that could have hurt innocent people, made all the fear and uncertainty worthwhile. Detective Harrison explained to Sarah and her grandmother, who had arrived in a state of near panic after being contacted by police, that the criminal organization would likely be arrested before they could attempt their planned robbery. The intelligence gathered from the rescued officers, combined with the evidence from their kidnapping, would provide enough justification for arrests and searches that would dismantle the entire operation. As evening approached, Sarah learned that the bank robbery had indeed been planned for 8:30 p.m., exactly as Officer Reynolds had reported. The criminals had intended to strike during a shift change when security would be momentarily reduced, then use their knowledge of police patrol routes to escape through carefully planned routes that would avoid law enforcement response. The arrest operation began at 7:15 p.m., with coordinated raids on 3 different locations simultaneously. Sarah watched from Tom Morrison's living room as news trucks arrived to cover the story that was already being described as one of the most significant criminal cases in the county's history. By 8 p.m., all 3 kidnappers were in custody, along with 2 additional members of their organization and the corrupt dispatcher who had been providing inside information. The bank robbery that had been months in the planning was prevented entirely, and a criminal network that might have gone on to commit additional serious crimes was completely dismantled. Sarah's grandmother sat beside her on the Morrisons' couch, alternating between pride in her granddaughter's courage and concern about the danger she had faced. "I don't know whether to ground you for going into the woods alone or give you a medal for what you accomplished," she said, with tears in her eyes. Detective Harrison had one final surprise for Sarah as the evening concluded. The state police were recommending her for a Civilian Bravery Award, and the rescued officers had specifically requested that she be recognized for her role in their rescue and the prevention of the bank robbery. The story of a 12-year-old girl and her dog who had stumbled upon kidnapped police officers and helped solve a major crime was already spreading throughout law enforcement circles and local media. The next morning brought a level of attention that Sarah had never experienced and frankly found overwhelming. News vans lined the street outside her grandmother's modest house, and reporters with cameras and microphones waited eagerly for any opportunity to speak with the young girl who had become an overnight sensation. Sarah's grandmother, Dorothy Jenkins, proved to be fiercely protective of her granddaughter's privacy and well-being. The 72-year-old, retired teacher had dealt with difficult situations throughout her career and was not intimidated by pushy journalists or curious neighbors who suddenly wanted to be part of the story. "That child needs normalcy, not a media circus," Dorothy told the persistent reporters firmly. She did what any decent person would do when they found people in trouble. And now she needs to get back to being a regular 12-year-old girl. But even Dorothy could not completely shield Sarah from the magnitude of what she had accomplished. The phone rang constantly with interview requests, and the mailbox filled with letters from people across the country who had heard the story and wanted to express their admiration for Sarah's courage and quick thinking. Detective Harrison visited on Wednesday morning to provide updates on the investigation and to discuss the legal proceedings that would follow. The 3 kidnappers had been charged with multiple felonies, including kidnapping law enforcement officers, conspiracy to commit robbery, and weapons violations. The corrupt dispatcher faced additional charges related to official misconduct and conspiracy. "The evidence you helped us gather will ensure that these criminals face serious prison time," Detective Harrison explained to Sarah and her grandmother. "Your bravery may have saved lives and prevented crimes that could have affected many families in this community." The detective also brought news that surprised everyone involved in the case. The FBI had become interested in the investigation because the criminal organization appeared to have connections to similar operations in other states. Sarah's discovery had potentially uncovered a multi-state crime network that had been operating undetected for several years. Officer Martinez and Officer Reynolds, now recovered from their ordeal, visited Sarah personally to thank her again for their rescue. Both men had returned to duty and were eager to express their gratitude to the young girl who had quite literally saved their lives. "I've been a police officer for 22 years," Martinez told Sarah, "and I've never encountered someone your age with such courage and presence of mind in a dangerous situation. You have the instincts of a natural-born protector." Officer Reynolds presented Sarah with an honorary junior deputy badge from the sheriff's department, along with a certificate recognizing her as an official friend of law enforcement. Rex received a special commendation as well, complete with his own badge and official designation as an honorary police dog. The attention from law enforcement agencies extended beyond local recognition. The state police issued a formal commendation, and the governor's office contacted Sarah's family to arrange a special ceremony acknowledging her civic service. Such recognition was extremely rare for someone of Sarah's age and spoke to the significant impact of her actions. At school, Sarah found herself in the unusual position of being a celebrity among her classmates. Students who had barely spoken to her before suddenly wanted to be her friend, and teachers looked at her with new respect and admiration. The attention was flattering but also somewhat uncomfortable for someone who had always been more comfortable in the background. Her best friend Emma, who had known Sarah since kindergarten, helped her navigate the sudden popularity with wisdom beyond her years. "Just remember that you're the same person you were before this happened," Emma advised during lunch. "The people who really matter knew you were special already." The story had captured public imagination in a way that surprised everyone involved. Local businesses wanted to honor Sarah with gifts and recognition. Civic organizations invited her to speak at their meetings, and the story had been picked up by national news outlets that portrayed her as an example of youth courage and civic responsibility. Tom Morrison, whose quick thinking and radio equipment had been crucial to the successful resolution of the crisis, found himself receiving recognition as well. The volunteer fire department honored him for his role in the operation, and his employer at the factory gave him time off to participate in the various ceremonies and interviews that followed. Jenny Morrison basked in reflected glory as Sarah's friend and the daughter of the man whose house had served as the impromptu command center. She helped Sarah handle the constant attention and served as a buffer between her friend and the more aggressive reporters who persisted in trying to get exclusive interviews. Rex, perhaps unsurprisingly, adapted to his newfound fame with typical canine grace. He enjoyed the extra attention and treats that came from well-wishers, but remained primarily focused on his relationship with Sarah and their daily routines that provided stability amid all the chaos. The financial implications of Sarah's heroism became apparent when the bank that had been targeted for robbery established a reward fund in her honor. Several local businesses contributed to the fund, which was designed to help with Sarah's future education expenses. The gesture was particularly meaningful, given her family's financial struggle since her parents' divorce. Detective Harrison revealed that the investigation had uncovered evidence of the criminals' plans for additional robberies in neighboring counties. The bank heist in Millbrook had been intended as the first in a series of crimes that could have affected hundreds of families and businesses throughout the region. Sarah's intervention had prevented not just one crime, but potentially dozens of future victims. The psychological impact of the experience began to manifest in unexpected ways. Sarah found herself more observant of her surroundings and more aware of unusual situations that might indicate problems. Rex seemed to have developed an even stronger protective instinct, staying closer to Sarah during their walks and remaining more alert to potential threats. Dorothy Jenkins watched her granddaughter navigate the attention with pride and concern. She recognized that the experience had changed Sarah in fundamental ways, aging her beyond her years in some respects while also reinforcing her natural compassion and sense of justice. The mayor of Millbrook announced plans for a special ceremony to honor Sarah's contribution to community safety. The event would include recognition from multiple law enforcement agencies and civic organizations, essentially making Sarah's heroism an official part of the town's history. For a girl who had often felt invisible and overlooked, the recognition represented a dramatic transformation in how her community viewed her contributions and potential. 3 weeks after the rescue, Sarah's life had settled into a new rhythm that balanced her sudden fame with attempts to maintain some normalcy. The initial media frenzy had died down somewhat, though occasional reporters still contacted her family seeking follow-up stories or anniversary pieces about the dramatic rescue. The special ceremony promised by the mayor took place on a crisp Saturday morning in Millbrook's town square. Sarah had been nervous about the public attention, but her grandmother and friends provided support that helped her get through the formal recognition. Nearly the entire town attended, along with representatives from state and federal law enforcement agencies. Governor Patricia Williams made a special trip to present Sarah with the state's highest civilian honor for courage and public service. The governor, a woman in her 60s known for her no-nonsense approach to politics, seemed genuinely moved by Sarah's story and spent considerable time speaking with her personally about the experience. Young people like Sarah remind us that heroism isn't about age or size, Governor Williams told the assembled crowd. It's about recognizing when something is wrong and having the courage to take action, even when that action involves personal risk. Rex received his own moment of recognition during the ceremony, wearing a special collar with his honorary police badge and receiving applause from the crowd that seemed to understand his crucial role in the discovery and rescue. Several children in attendance were clearly more excited to meet the famous dog than to see the human celebrities present. The FBI agent who had taken over the expanded investigation, Special Agent David Chen, revealed during the ceremony that Sarah's actions had led to the dismantling of a criminal network responsible for planned crimes in 4 different states. The organization had been sophisticated and well-funded, with connections to other criminal enterprises that made their capture especially significant. This young lady's courage prevented not just one bank robbery, but potentially dozens of future crimes, Agent Chen explained to the crowd. The criminal network we uncovered had been operating for several years and was responsible for millions of dollars in planned thefts and other serious crimes. The ceremony also included the presentation of a check from the reward fund that had been established by grateful community members and businesses. The amount, which totaled nearly $15,000, would be held in trust for Sarah's college education. For a family that had struggled financially, the fund represented security and opportunities that had previously seemed impossible. Officer Martinez and Officer Reynolds, now fully recovered from their ordeal, spoke eloquently about Sarah's role in their rescue and the professionalism she had demonstrated during the crisis. Both men had become something like honorary uncles to Sarah, checking in on her regularly and including her in department activities when appropriate. Sarah saved our lives, but more than that, she showed wisdom and courage that many adults never demonstrate, Officer Martinez told the crowd. She represents the very best of what we hope to see in the next generation of citizens. The local newspaper published a special edition commemorating the event, complete with interviews and photographs that captured the community's pride in Sarah's accomplishment. The paper also announced that Sarah would write a monthly column about safety awareness and community involvement, giving her a platform to share her experiences and encourage other young people to be aware of their surroundings. Tom Morrison received recognition as well for his crucial role in the successful resolution of the crisis. The volunteer fire department promoted him to assistant chief, and the factory where he worked established a community service award in his honor. His quick thinking and willingness to help strangers had proven as important as Sarah's initial discovery. The psychological counselor who had been working with Sarah to help her process the traumatic aspects of her experience reported that she was adapting remarkably well to both the stress of the original incident and the pressure of subsequent attention. Sarah's natural resilience and strong support system had helped her maintain perspective and emotional stability throughout the challenging period. The school district decided to use Sarah's story as part of their curriculum. On civic responsibility and personal safety, Sarah agreed to speak to younger students about the importance of trusting their instincts and seeking help from trusted adults when they encountered dangerous situations. Her presentations were age-appropriate, but emphasized that children could make a difference in their communities. Jenny Morrison had proven to be an invaluable friend throughout the entire experience, helping Sarah navigate social situations and providing a sense of normalcy when the attention became overwhelming. Their friendship had deepened through the shared experience, and Jenny took pride in her connection to the town's newest hero. Detective Harrison visited regularly to update Sarah on the legal proceedings against the criminals. All 3 kidnappers had accepted plea bargains that would result in significant prison sentences, while the corrupt dispatcher faced federal charges that could lead to even longer incarceration. The legal resolution provided closure and ensured that justice would be served. The experience had changed Sarah's perspective on many aspects of life. She felt more confident in social situations, more aware of her ability to make a positive difference, and more committed to helping others when opportunities arose. The shy, overlooked girl who had discovered the kidnapped officers had evolved into a young woman with a strong sense of purpose and community responsibility. Rex had adapted to his celebrity status with typical canine resilience, enjoying the extra attention while maintaining his primary focus on his relationship with Sarah. The bond between them had grown even stronger through their shared adventure, and Rex continued to demonstrate the protective instincts and intelligence that had made the rescue possible. Dorothy Jenkins watched her granddaughter's transformation with mixed emotions. She was proud of Sarah's courage and the recognition she had received, but also concerned about the pressure and expectations that came with her newfound status. The elderly woman worked carefully to ensure that Sarah remained grounded and focused on her education and personal development rather than becoming caught up in the attention and praise. As autumn progressed toward winter, Sarah began to look forward to returning to a more normal routine. The immediate excitement of the rescue and its aftermath was giving way to a deeper understanding of the long-term impact of her actions. She had not only saved 2 lives and prevented serious crimes, but had also discovered strengths and capabilities within herself that would serve her well throughout her life. The town of Millbrook had been changed by the events as well. The community had rallied around Sarah and her family, demonstrating the kind of support and unity that strengthened social bonds and encouraged others to become more involved in civic life. Sarah's example had inspired other young people to become more aware of their surroundings and more willing to take appropriate action when they witnessed problems or dangerous situations. 6 months later, Sarah Jenkins had found her footing in a life that balanced her extraordinary experience with the ordinary routines of a 13-year-old girl. The intense media attention had faded to occasional follow-up articles and anniversary pieces, allowing her to focus on school, friendships, and the normal challenges of adolescence. The college fund established in her honor had continued to grow through donations from people across the country who had been inspired by her story. Financial advisors helped Dorothy Jenkins manage the fund responsibly, ensuring that Sarah would have genuine opportunities for higher education that had previously been beyond the family's reach. Sarah's monthly column in the local newspaper had evolved into something quite special. Her writing demonstrated wisdom and perspective that impressed adult readers while remaining accessible to young people who saw her as a relatable role model. The column covered topics ranging from personal safety to community involvement, always emphasizing the importance of looking out for others and trusting one's instincts. The criminal trials had concluded with satisfying results. The 3 kidnappers received sentences ranging from 15 to 25 years in federal prison, while the corrupt dispatcher was sentenced to 12 years for his role in the conspiracy. Agent Chen kept Sarah informed about the ongoing investigation into the broader criminal network, which had led to additional arrests in 3 other states. Rex had maintained his status as an honorary police dog and regularly visited the sheriff's department for training exercises and community events. His natural intelligence and protective instincts had been further developed through informal training with the K-9 unit, making him an even more capable companion for Sarah's continued explorations of the woods around Millbrook. The relationship between Sarah and officers Martinez and Reynolds had evolved into genuine friendship that extended to their families. Both men included Sarah in department activities when appropriate, and she had become something of a mascot for the sheriff's department. Their wives had embraced Sarah as well, providing additional adult support and guidance as she navigated her teenage years. Tom Morrison's recognition had led to his election as chief of the volunteer fire department, a position he accepted with characteristic humility and dedication. His radio equipment, which had played such a crucial role in the rescue operation, had been upgraded with donations from grateful community members who recognized the importance of emergency communication capabilities. Jenny Morrison remained Sarah's closest friend and most trusted confidant. The shared experience of the rescue had strengthened their friendship, and Jenny took pride in her connection to Millbrook's most famous resident. She also served as a reality check when the attention and praise threatened to go to Sarah's head, reminding her friend to stay grounded and focused on what really mattered. Detective Harrison had been promoted to captain, partly based on her handling of the kidnapping case and subsequent investigation. She maintained contact with Sarah and occasionally consulted with her on cases involving young witnesses or victims, recognizing that Sarah's experience and maturity made her valuable in helping other children cope with traumatic situations. The governor's office had established an annual Youth Courage Award in Sarah's honor, recognizing young people throughout the state who demonstrated exceptional bravery or civic responsibility. Sarah served on the selection committee and participated in the annual ceremony, finding fulfillment in helping other young heroes receive recognition for their contributions to their communities. Sarah's academic performance had improved significantly following her rescue of the officers. The confidence she had gained from the experience translated into better participation in class and stronger relationships with teachers who recognized her potential. Her grades improved enough to put her on track for academic scholarships that would supplement the reward fund for her college education. The psychological counseling had helped Sarah process not only the immediate trauma of discovering kidnapped officers and facing potential danger, but also the longer-term impact of sudden fame and recognition. She had learned coping strategies for dealing with pressure and expectations while maintaining her sense of identity and personal values. Dorothy Jenkins had watched her granddaughter's transformation with deep satisfaction and pride. The shy, overlooked girl who had struggled with her parents' divorce and the family's financial difficulties had become a confident young woman with a strong sense of purpose and unlimited potential. The elderly woman knew that Sarah's future was now filled with possibilities that had once seemed impossible. The town of Millbrook had embraced Sarah's story as part of its official history and identity. A small monument in the town square commemorated the rescue and its significance, while the local school district used Sarah's experience as part of their curriculum on civic responsibility and personal courage. Tourism had even increased slightly as people came to see the town where a young girl and her dog had made such a dramatic difference. Rex continued to be Sarah's constant companion and protector, though their walks in the woods now included occasional visits from other dog owners who hoped some of Rex's fame might rub off on their pets. The golden retriever seemed to understand his special status but remained focused on his primary job of watching out for Sarah and enjoying their adventures together. The FBI investigation had ultimately revealed that the criminal network Sarah had helped expose was responsible for crimes across multiple states and had been planning an expansion that could have affected dozens of communities. Agent Chen estimated that Sarah's intervention had prevented millions of dollars in losses and potentially saved multiple lives that could have been lost during future robberies. As Sarah prepared to enter high school, she reflected on how completely her life had changed since that Tuesday afternoon, when Rex had led her off their usual trail. The experience had taught her that ordinary people could accomplish extraordinary things when they had the courage to act on their convictions and help others in need. The scholarship offers that had begun arriving from colleges impressed by her story and academic improvement suggested that Sarah's future would include opportunities she had never dared to dream about. Law enforcement agencies had also expressed interest in her potential career in criminal justice, though Sarah remained open to exploring different possibilities as she continued her education. Most importantly, Sarah had learned that being a hero was not about seeking recognition or reward, but about doing the right thing when faced with difficult choices. The girl who had once felt invisible and unimportant had discovered that she possessed the courage, intelligence, and compassion to make a real difference in the world. As she looked toward the future, Sarah knew that her experience in the woods had been just the beginning of a life dedicated to helping others and serving her community. Whether through law enforcement, public service, or simply being the kind of person who noticed when others needed help, she was committed to making the most of the opportunities that her moment of courage had created. Rex wagged his tail and nuzzled her hand as they sat together on the porch of their grandmother's house, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Whatever adventures lay ahead, Sarah knew that she would face them with the confidence that came from understanding her own capabilities and the unwavering support of the loyal companion who had started it all.